Hello, my name is Rabbi Aaron Hecht, and I thank you for allowing me to visit with you. I have a rather strange question to pose to you. How often do you think about the earth? Now, I know as a topic of discussion, people are always discussing the weather. Hot and cold, the changes, but do we ever actually stop and talk about the earth? No, I'm not talking about environmental concerns. I'm talking about the simple reality. You woke up in the morning and you started to walk on terra firma. We take it for granted, even though upon reflection we should actually realize the great kindness that we have a land to walk on. I mean, we just take it for granted it will be there and immovable and firm, and then one day the earth shudders and moves and we are frightened and anxious and things happen, and we have a special name for that. It's called the earthquake. We assume that the earth will just be flat, almost unassuming, until we're actually confronted with a piece of earth that is in front of us, and we call that a mountain. Then we walk a little further down and we assume that the earth will be there for us until we come to a place where it seems to be going into oblivion. We look down, it's a ravine or a gorge. So there are plenty of changes within the earth itself for us to recognize that there's a gift of the land, a gift of the earth. And indeed, pious Jews every single day actually say a blessing. Blessed are you, God, Roka ha'aretz alamayin, who has spread forth the earth on water. Why do I bring this up today? Because in the Torah portion of this week, we find a very, very interesting law, and that is the land of Israel. 6 years you may work on it, and on the 7th year the land should rest. It is a sabbatical year. In Hebrew it is called Shemitah. Now, there's much to discuss about this, but I'd like to share with you just a thought or two. The first thought is, isn't it remarkable that the Torah, who gives us laws concerning man and man, certainly concerning man and God, gives us laws concerning man and animals, man and the environment, and now the Torah tells us, don't forget the earth. You should know the fact that there is a land, you have to be aware of this and actually appreciative. And once in 7 years, and then in the Jubilee year, again in the 50th year, you must give the land an acknowledgement that it needs to rest as well. Indeed, not only a rest from you working the land, tilling the land, but the type of a spiritual rest that just as you on the Sabbath, the Shabbat, increased in holiness, you should know that the earth itself absorbs a greater measure of holiness on the 7th year, and indeed, even the fruits are holy. The earth is a very great teacher. And amongst the many things it teaches us, it exemplifies humility. Just reflect. Day after day, the earth produces grain, fruit, vegetables, sustenance. All of our minerals come from the earth. All of our precious minerals, diamonds, come from the earth. Things of beauty come from the earth. Water itself, fresh water, springs, come from the earth. Now, we owe so much to be great. We are grateful to God, who gives us the bounty of the earth. But when do we ever acknowledge the source? In other words, when we're walking on the earth, do we ever think that this is something that God created that works tirelessly for our benefit? No, the earth is very humble. And indeed, one of the great Hasidic masters pointed out that he learned humility from the earth itself. Everyone walks on the earth. People pay no attention to the earth. And yet the earth does not lose one iota of greatness. It continues to produce, and it continues to bless, and it continues to do its God-ordained work. That is humility. To fulfill the responsibility and not be affected by the indifference or worse of people around you. I'll close with a Hasidic story. The second generation of the Hasidic masters, his name was Reb Dov Ber of Mezrich, and he was blessed with a son who was so divorced from physicality that he had a nickname. They called him the Angel, Reb Avraham the Malach. Of course, he was a celebrity wherever he went. He was more angelic than human, and people from many vicinities and places would travel just to get an opportunity to see him and perhaps be privileged to spend a couple of minutes in conversation to get some of his wisdom and blessing. One day, Reb Avram the Malach, Reb Avram the saintly man, comes to a large city, and he's hosted in someone's lavish home, and he was shown to a study. The Rebbe was deep in meditation and spent the time in the study thinking, reflecting, and essentially being very introspective. In the meantime, the word spread that there's this great holy saint in town, and people by the scores were lining up to have the opportunity to see and perhaps even converse briefly with the Rebbe. Well, amongst the crowd was a young scholar, a little bit too big for his breeches, or simply put, he was wet behind the ears and a bit arrogant. And he thought, well, being that I'm a Torah scholar and my time is so precious, probably as soon as the Rebbe is aware that I am waiting in line, the door will be opened and he'll be thrilled to encounter me. But of course, the Rebbe kept the door closed and was deep in his meditation, and the people respectfully were waiting. Well, this young scholar, it did not sit well with him, and what he did was he pushed himself to the front of the line and then peeked in through the keyhole. He was hoping that perhaps the Rebbe was deep in study, but to his surprise, all he saw was the back of the Rebbe. The Rebbe was actually gazing out of a window, looking at a hill. This was just too much for this man. And he knocks, and without even waiting for a response, he opens up the door, and the Rebbe's back is still turned to him, and he's looking out this window, and the young Talmud Chacham cannot take this any longer, this affront to his dignity, to his scholarship, and he says, Rebbe, what are you looking at? No response. Rebbe, all I see is a hill. What's there to look at a piece of earth? What lesson is it teaching you? And the Rebbe replied, without turning his back, indeed, that's what I am gazing at. How can a piece of earth, a lump of clay, be so arrogant to stick itself up and to portray itself as something lofty and great? Oh, those words penetrated deep. The Talmud Chacham then understood man is compared to earth, and a hill is just a piece of earth standing upright. What's there to be so arrogant about? Well, he left chastened as well as informed. And this is the story that I'll leave you with. Today's Torah portion, which discusses the laws of the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, perhaps it's to teach us to be a little bit more humble. Perhaps it's to teach us not to take things for granted. And perhaps it's to inspire us that even earth can be made holy, even earthly things, simple things, can be elevated to a higher form of divine worship. I wish you a wonderful Shabbat and a happy forever. Shalom.